You're listening to Crystal and Emily on Love Your Shelf, the best librarian podcast in the extensive and highly competitive field of librarian podcasts. Hello.
Hello.
So we are on episode 4.7 of Love Your Shelf, and it's me, Crystal, here, and I have a special guest today who has the distinction of having been a guest before and was on the most listened to episode that we ever had. And that's Amy.
Hello. It's very nice to be on again. Thank you so much for inviting me.
Yes. So last time she talked to bodice rippers, which is one of my favorite terms ever. But we're going to switch it up a little bit this time and talk about some nonfiction.
Yes.
And Emily is on vacation, so...
I am very sad about that because we're actually meeting in person to do this.
Yeah.
And I love Emily, her funny laugh. My laugh isn't as good as hers, so...
You can just try to do hers. Just try to mimic her.
It's impossible.
Yeah, I can't do it either. But we will still be funny, probably.
Absolutely.
I mean, ideally. Well, I'm going to let Amy start and talk about the nonfiction that she's read, and then we'll move on. I mean, if she leaves me any time, then I will talk about some things I've read, and then we'll wrap up with some other odds and ends.
Nice. Well, I'll just start out by saying that I found TikTok last year, and Book Talk has just been my obsession. I found some really great book talkers that are nonfiction book talkers, and so I feel like every book they recommend is going to be a 5-star read for me because they know my taste perfectly. So I have decided to read more nonfiction this year than I ever have. I usually read maybe 3 nonfiction books a year.
Oh, that's a big switch.
Yeah, and so far I've read 14 this year, so it is huge. I love fiction because I read to escape, and the escapism isn't to be found in nonfiction. You have to realize this is the reality that you're reading about, and sometimes it's terrible things you're reading about. So
I think that's the tricky part with nonfiction, and that's why I think a lot of people don't necessarily read it. And I was the same. I only ever read fiction until I started working for the library, and I selected all of the nonfiction. So as reference being part of my duties. So so I ended up that I kind of flip-flopped and completely now, read a lot more nonfiction than otherwise. But there's so many different things in nonfiction, just like with fiction. But, if I'm not into, I don't know, space or, they're so particular, you want it to be something that is by somebody who's a great writer and all that kind of stuff, but it also has to be your interest.
Exactly. Mm-hmm. And then you have to have like thoughts and opinions about the things you read, like even discerning if it's true or not, because the world we live in today, anyone can write anything. So you really have to think about it. And so nonfiction, you have to think in a different way because you're really thinking about world issues and not just space. Like,
right. I don't know why that was the first thing that came to my mind.
It is true. It is true. So I started reading nonfiction in January and started really hard with Empire of Pain, The Secret History of the Sackler Dynasty by Patrick Keefe. And if you don't already hate the Sackler family, read this book and you will definitely hate them. It's about the Purdue Pharma. They're the family that owns Purdue Pharma, and they distribute OxyContin and were the cause of the opioid pandemic, and it was intense. It's not just like, oh, they're so bad now, like generationally, this family has just been slime. So it really got to me, and it was really a good book to start with because once I got into it, I couldn't put it down, and it was very interesting. I also read Hood Feminism, Notes from the Women That a Movement Forgot by Mickey Kendall, and I really enjoyed that book. I think she had so many really important things to say. Then I went to A Carnival of Snackery. It's David Sedaris's diary entries from like 2003 to 2020, and And if you are going to read nonfiction, I highly recommend you read some funny people in there.
Yes,
because,
you got to sprinkle in the
absolutely,
humor.
because it is definitely fun. I laughed so hard at some of the parts of this book that I cried. It was hilarious.
And the best thing about the humor memoir kind of thing is it's really almost always the author that's reading it, which is great.
It's great.
With David Sedaris, it's beyond great because he knows exactly the intonation. He has a funny voice.
He does.
And in this book, he has Tracy Ullman, for some reason, do all of the chapters where he's in England. And, of course, she's a woman. And it just makes for just a delightful, like, switch up, between, he's telling stories about the United States and France, and then we jump over to the pond, and it's Tracy Ullman.
Here's Tracy making just a mess of everything.
Yes.
No, it was hilarious, and I did listen to it on audiobook, so it was especially
thanks for
funny.
clarifying that.
Yeah,
You do have
it
to
was
listen to it on
especially
audio.
funny. Because of
It doesn't
that.
happen when you read the book yourself. So.
But I think he actually created that book for audiobook because he does make fun of his own voice. He does say things in it that you're like, if I read this in a print version, I wouldn't have gotten that joke as well. So
Yeah,
the
there's
audiobook is
sarcasm.
amazing.
Yeah, the first audiobook I ever listened to, except for like records of fairy tales when I was a child, was Me Talk Pretty One Day, his first book that he, I guess his first famous book.
Yeah.
And he read it, and I loved it. But then when you start at that level, it kind of goes downhill from there, because not every book is going to be that good when it's an audio.
Absolutely.
In fact, there are lots of books that the audio was bad, and so I couldn't listen to it.
Yeah. Well, I fall in love with the people reading the audiobook. I'm terrified that the person that reads the Outlander series, something will happen to her.
Davina Porter.
Yes, because she is Claire's voice to me in so many ways.
And everybody's.
Yeah, exactly.
She's amazing. She's another one that if you listen to anything else, that's especially with so many different characters.
Yes.
With different accents.
I know.
And you know
and
how it is.
she's talking through the man's view and everything, but you are with her from the first word.
It's some kind of magic that she should read all of those kinds of books.
Yes, for sure. Yes. Well, after David Sedaris, I then went hard again with Cast: The Origins of Our Discontent by Isabel Wilkerson. And it was a hard read. I mean, beautifully written, such an important work, but I had to pull away from it and read a romance novel in the middle of it just to get away from the depression that it was bringing, because it's so good, and it's something that needed to be written so badly, but it was really hard to read. But I loved it. I think everyone should read it.
It's been on so many must read lists and stuff.
I can understand why.
It's important.
It is.
And another of her books that was from a few years ago was also like that, and now I can't think of the title, so why did I mention it? But everything she writes is great.
Yeah.
And it's always something that's seminal, that it's not just that she's a good writer, but she's writing about something that really needs to be examined,
discussed in the workplace, and every place that you are, everywhere.
Yes.
Well, because it was such a rough book to read, I immediately went to Wow, No Thank You. It were essays by Samantha Irby, who is as hilarious as David Sedaris, and loved that so much. That was when I realized this is what you're going to have to do with nonfiction. You can read something that is going to break your heart for the whole world, and then you can read something that is just going to make you giggle and laugh, and at the same time you'll learn something. So it was good.
There's a through line in those funny ones that they're self-deprecating.
Yes.
Very much, very, very much.
Exactly.
Just
well, you have to laugh at yourself or you'll cry your eyes out. If you didn't, it's it's so good.
Exactly.
It's so good. Yeah. Well, the next one I read is very out of character for me. I'm not into self-help books at all. I think I put them on some lower level of the book echelon.
I have a tendency to do that too.
Which isn't nice. But I had so many book talkers talk about this book that I read, The Untethered Soul, The Journey Beyond Yourself by Michael Singer. And I will say that this book did something to blow my mind, in that he tells you that you don't have to listen to that voice inside your head that actually it's giving you really bad advice. And Jane Eyre is one of my favorite books from when I was really little. And there's a quote that Charlotte Bronte says, that the still small voice which interprets the dictates of conscience. And I've lived with that line my whole life. Like, listening to what I'm telling myself in my head is so important because it's guiding me. And that's a lie. That little voice is not telling you good things. I mean, I'm 52 years old, and I can tell you it has given me consistently bad advice on everything.
Because it's not coming at it from a place of pure logic. We always think that that's kind of how it is, but it's informed by your stuff that you don't even remember.
Exactly. Exactly. And, I would find myself, after I read that book, I would mess up something at work and be like, oh, you're so stupid. And I would be like, why are you listening to that? If a human being came up and said, you're stupid, you would be like, get away from me. But you're letting that thing in your head say that. Don't listen to it anymore, you know? And it really changed the way I think about things. And now I actually talk to myself more than I did before. But most of the time, it's like, you can shut up now. Yeah. I'm not even listening to you. You can shut up now. But
if we ever hear you, like, Amy spends lots of time in the library, so if we hear her from somewhere around, we'll know that she's talking to the voice in her head.
Exactly. It's totally safe. Everyone's safe. But I also read The Argonauts by Maggie Nelson, and actually I saw Crystal had read it, so that's why I got it, and I loved that book on so many levels. It made me recall my pregnancies, and it was just really poignant and just all of the things that she was talking about, and I thought it was just wonderful. I really loved it.
Well, when I read that, which was recently, and in fact I'm going to talk about one of her other books today, I saw that her partner is Harry Dodge, and I was like, that's familiar to me. And it turns out, I looked up their, biography or whatever, and they were in a movie back in the 90s.
Wow.
Yeah. Cecil B. Demented.
Oh, and I remember that movie. Yeah. That's so funny.
Yeah. And so I went and rewatched it. And I have to, give you the caveat that if you're not a John Waters fan,
I knew that's where it was going. Yeah,
don't go and watch that movie and feel betrayed by me. You go if you're not familiar with John Waters, dip your toe in and see if that seems like something that you're going to want to watch, and then watch it and enjoy it. But because it's bonkers. But Harry Dodge was in that.
That's so movie. Cool. Yeah. That's so cool. Well, I did enjoy that book, and I remember thinking I need to find more books by this woman. She is speaking in voices that I want to hear more of.
Yeah, for sure.
I also read Rock My Soul, Black People and Self-Esteem by Bell Hooks, because she recently passed away, and so I'm just on a Bell Hooks kick, and just wonderful. The writing is wonderful. It's so poignant today, decades later. I can't say enough good things about Bell Hooks. I also read In the Dream House by Carmen Maria Machado. It was a book recommended on TikTok. It's a big book on Book Talk. And it was absolutely wonderful. I can't even talk about it because I'll start crying because it is so wonderful and good. And I just read it. Just go and read it.
I haven't heard of this.
Oh, really? Yeah, I actually got it off of Libby. Yeah, and I read it in one sitting. I couldn't put it down because I was just mesmerized by it.
Wow.
But that's what I'm saying about Book Talk. It's like once they get your algorithm right, the people suggesting things to you, it's almost like they can get inside your head and know exactly what you need at that very particular moment.
I've been trying to curate my Book Talk, but I think my other things that I'm interested in.
Your other weird.
It's confusing them because I haven't kind of gotten it exactly right yet. But I'm working on it. So I'm following more book talkers for sure. But yeah.
Yeah. I can't get enough of it. But yeah, some of my weird stuff creeps in, but that's why you can just swipe it.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's
nice. Not going to hurt you, It's just.
But the last book that I read, I actually it was also something you had read that I'd seen, and it's called Overdue, Reckoning with the Public Library by Amanda Oliver. And first of all, I need to ask you, are you okay? I am so worried about librarians after reading this that I was shocked on a lot of things. I think the main thing I was shocked about is that librarians are not considered first responders, when I just never dreamt that that was true. I think of the library as the first place to go if you need help. And I know during hurricane evacuations, things, library staff they're manning those centers, they're answering those phones, they're giving the information. So it was strange to me. I felt betrayed by the system because for thinking that the librarians aren't first responders just was not a concept I was ready to even be faced with, because it was obvious they are. But just the other things in it, I think it must be such a stressful job where I just show up at the library and browse the books and take home things, and I'm so happy. But y'all are really doing services in the community that go unrecognized. And are you okay, Crystal?
Today.
Okay, good.
No, and I felt by that book, and I discussed it briefly before, but that her tone was a little bit off, because I feel like, at least here, all the librarians that I know, it is a calling for those people. And so all of that stuff that's negative, yes, we want things to be better, because part of what makes us have to fulfill that role is because of the lack of other roles in society to care for the people that are coming here. And so we want that, 100%.
Yes.
That would be the best thing. But filling in and having to, take on those stressors, that's just part of it. That's just what we do. And so it's not, we have our days.
Yeah.
I was just saying, sometimes we'll be bombarded with things, and then just, is it a full moon? What's going on? What's happening? And anybody that works in the public service, I think, has those very similar experiences. But it has been, in the last few decades, an increasing challenge because of the lack of other social services.
Absolutely.
And so one of the things that several years ago I read about, I think it was in San Francisco, that they had hired a social worker. And it was, everybody just thought, well, why? What's going on? Why would you need that? And then, within 2 years, they're everywhere. And we've had social work interns. We try to continue to have them. Because people need referrals to the basic stuff that there is. And there's not enough.
And the first place anyone goes is a public library when they need help, not just with their book report, but with life events.
I deal a lot more with job applications and like financial information and tax stuff than I do with book reports, honestly.
Wow.
There's still those things.
Yes.
But there's a lot more. And of course, the digital age left a bunch of people behind,
Absolutely.
So not as much now, but 10 years ago when I started as a public librarian, there were just people who had never touched a mouse or interacted with a computer. A computer mouse.
Yeah,
I don't know
in
about
my
the living
head,
ones.
I'm still in that in between age. So a mouse automatically means something else. But then I'm like, no, she's talking computers.
Yes,
it's fine. Yeah.
So I can't tell you how many people I've taught how to use a mouse, and I remember the world before computers.
Yeah.
But I was young enough that I, became pretty almost native to that, But, so those people in a digital age struggled mightily. They needed somebody to really, really, really help them. And also being a public place, that includes the public. So
amazingly enough.
Yeah. It's not that shocking. But, the book had made me think of, there's a movie called The Public, made by Emilio Estevez, about, it's fictional, but it's about the problems that
I remember the trailer for that movie and thinking, ooh, this looks so good, but I don't think I ever saw it.
Yeah, it wasn't widely released. It wasn't a huge hit or anything. But that movie in particular deals with, I want to say it's in Cincinnati or something, and it's very, very minus 10 degrees
Oh,
cold
gosh.
there. And there's a huge homeless population. And in the movie, they barricade themselves in the library and said, we're not going to go out. It's warm in here. We're not leaving. What are
As
you gonna do about it?
any human being would do.
Yeah.
You know, I mean,
because
if
there
you're
are
being
people around
treated
them
as a
where-
human being, it just makes sense. Yeah.
And so in that false or that fictional situation, it brought to light all of these players that have a say or have a role in how that kind of thing gets handled. So it's worth a watch. But the book, she only worked as a public librarian less than a year.
Exactly.
And she had been a school librarian, and school librarians have their own very real set of issues as well.
Yeah.
It's just a little bit different. But yeah, I felt like yes, it's a struggle, but that maybe there could have been more of the love for
your
it.
job. Yeah.
And not everybody is cut out for it.
Yeah.
Which I'm not cut out for doing other things, for sure. And I don't know that I'm cut out for it. I have days. Today was one of, it started off pretty rough.
Wow.
But, here it is, the end of the day, and I get to do something else that I love to do.
Something fun. Yeah. Absolutely. Well, that is my most recommended ones that I've read, and I'd love to hear what nonfiction you've been picking up.
I read a Maggie Nelson book called Red Parts, Autobiography of a Trial. And it's about the unsolved murder case of her mother's sister.
True crime.
Yes.
I love it.
And so the case went unsolved for 35 years.
Oh, wow.
And so she never knew her aunt, but she talks in the book about her mother's connection and then having to go to court to face this person that they finally, locate after all these years. And that because she had been, it was like a very strange kind of everything coming together for her, because Maggie Nelson had been writing a book of poetry about her aunt.
Oh, wow.
Called Jane, a Murder. And it was about to be published when they find this guy. And so she actually gets drawn in by the detectives because she'd done all of this research and they wanted to know what she might have unearthed. So she gets this,
helped solve the crime.
Yes.
Oh my gosh, that's beautiful.
It's very good.
And just knowing her writing style, I bet it's just wonderful.
Yeah.
The whole book, yeah.
And she's very raw. She talks about all the emotions, and you really feel the empathy connection, and so, it made me think about true crime. There's the joke of, that women love true crime, but if you see a puppy that's abused, you're just bawling, but you just gleefully listening to a podcast about true crime or watching it. And I saw something recently, and I've often thought this too, is that I think that women, and then speaking for myself, okay, so I
Let's start over.
I think watch and listen to that stuff because it is like, what would I do? Because I think women do have this shadow over them of violence or these things that can happen. And so it's like, well, I know I'm not going to live in this kind of place, and if I'm walking in the park, I'm going to do this, and also hearing about all of the possible things that could happen. It's more of a girding yourself with knowledge instead of taking in pleasure in it.
Absolutely, yeah.
But so I don't know if that's how you feel about it or not.
Well, my grandmother used to say if I was scared of something like, say, Bigfoot, which amazingly enough I was scared of a lot as a child, but she would be like,
East Texas.
Yeah, she was like, think of the worst thing Bigfoot could do to you, and be like, he could kill me because he's big. And she'd be like, okay, and then then you're dead. Okay, let's move on now. And so it's like thinking of the worst thing that could happen to you actually eases your mind in some way because you feel prepared for that in a way. It's so bizarre. But I think that's the high that I get when I listen to like true crime podcasts. But I want a resolution. I don't know if that's just the way my brain works. I don't want months from now to start thinking about it again. I want them to tell me who killed them. I want that person in jail or dead or whatever. I want it all resolved at the end.
Yeah, those are the best ones.
Yeah,
for sure.
So I have to be really careful with true crime, because if I get drawn into it, I'll become one of those nut jobs that have read every book about that subject, and I'm there helping the police even though they don't need my help.
Right. Yeah, I understand. And it made me think about Michelle McNamara's "I'll Be Gone in the Dark," because her and these other people that are in this. She wrote the book and then passed away, and then there was a documentary made about it. Oh, wow. And so, if you haven't read that, you should read it.
I don't think I have.
It's about the Golden State Killer, which was out there forever and ever. And
I have seen it on Book Talk. Yes. I will tell you that immediately. Yeah, as soon as you say Golden State Killer, I'm like, yes.
Yeah. So she devoted years of her life, and then it's all these other people as well that were just true crime aficionados.
I love how you said aficionado and not nutcases, because that's what I thought you were going to say.
There's a fine line. And I think you were talking about it
I know.
Just a second ago.
I'm scared of becoming past that fine line. Yes.
But, she actually contributed to locating this guy and bringing him to justice. And so those are the really good ones, right? That's the one where, regardless what happens, and it also in that series shows the dark side of it too, like these women who had been victimized, for decades later, so they get to see this guy go to prison, and it's like, well, is that enough?
I know, yeah.
No, it doesn't fix anything.
I know, it's still not.
It's still terrible.
Good.
It's a nightmare. So, there's a lot going on in all of that stuff. It's not just, a silly thing that, that we can make a joke about. Although,
absolutely.
Yeah. It is bizarre.
Yes.
But
there's human nature. You see so much of human nature in real crime that you're surprised every time.
Yeah. Yeah. Now, that leads into another kind of memoir. And so that I read after this one. It's called My Autobiography of Carson McCullers by Jen Shapland. And I really like just the title, really kind of digs into that concept. Like, even when you're reading nonfiction, you're still evaluating it and analyzing it to pull out what's the truth, right?
Yes.
And so when you write a biography of somebody, you are influenced by the things that you know about and that you like, and what you
absolutely, how
you read that person's life, right? And so Carson McCullers, as a writer that I loved, and she wrote Southern Gothic stories. Yeah. And so she had a bunch of papers that were actually at the Ransom Center at UT, and Jen Shapland started digging into them and comes across these things that in turn inspired her own self-discovery, because there was a Carson McCullers, it turns out, struggled with her queerness, and so it becomes this examination for Shapland of, this is making me think about myself,
my
too.
life. Yeah, exactly.
And so it made me also think about, not just that, how we're impacted by what we read and, take in and that kind of thing. But also, it made me think about, there's kind of a horror
aspect.
Nice. That, somebody coming after you and trying to read your life based on what you left behind.
Oh, yeah.
In written form.
Oh, no.
Yeah. Isn't that a terrible thought? It's terrible.
It's why people put in their wills, like, burn all my journals when I die. Do not let people read them.
Yeah. And not that we think that necessarily we're going to be great enough that people want to read those. Just anybody. Because you don't have that control of how it's going to be read.
Exactly. We're not David Sedaris. We don't get to put the funny parts as funny instead of tragic. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. When he's reading his journals, he edited that.
Exactly.
And probably a bunch of other people did too.
Exactly.
There's a lot of garbage in there, I'm sure. Not that, that's just what you do. Right?
Exactly.
But when you're a writer, but if you're just, Joe Schmo out here with your, notes to yourself with your groceries and whatever else that you're using. Yeah. No. Yeah, it's a horrible thought. But in this case, it was great.
I'm so glad.
Because there is a great, treasure trove of information about Carson McCullers, and it also influenced this other writer's life. So
nice.
Let's see. So I also want to talk about some other things besides books, as I mentioned. But before we do that, I want to talk about a couple of shows that are based on books.
Oh, cool.
So we're going to transition, I guess.
I like it.
So I just started watching last night, Under the Banner of Heaven.
I did too.
All right, great.
I watched 2 episodes.
I think that's all there is.
Yeah, that's all that's out at this particular point.
I'm so glad.
Yes.
So I want to know what you think about it. It was based on a book by the same title by John Krakauer, who also wrote Into the Wild, which was made into a movie as well. Yeah. It's on Hulu, and Andrew Garfield is the main character, basically.
Yeah, and I'm not gonna lie, I watched it because of Andrew Garfield, because I think he's just a little cutie, and not like, I just think of him as like one of my children, and I want him to be successful. It's weird. So whenever I see him in something, I'm like, I'm gonna watch that just like supporting him. But then within, I'm not even kidding, 10 minutes of it, I was so drawn in that I was just like, I am going to binge watch this whole thing. But then there were only 2 episodes, so I had to stop. It was like, I have my life back for another week. But
Yeah, so it's a murder case that's in the 80s. It's true. And it's set. It's true, but it's set. It happened in Utah and within this Mormon community. And so there's so many things going on.
So much.
And there's all of these like identity politics and religious things that have to be dealt with, and how there are like different sects under the heading of this religion or whatever, that different people take different things from it. So there's just a lot to unpack, but it's also like an urgent, like trying to find a killer story.
Yes.
And so I think it's great so far.
I think it's great too. And if I would have known it was set in a Mormon thing, I probably wouldn't have just watched it right away. It might have gone on my list and I would have come across it, just because I stay away from religious TV shows just because I don't want to get into it. I don't want to learn about a new religion. I don't want to disparage any religion. I'm like, I'm just not interested in that. But the thing that kept me hooked was that the editing is so bizarre that while they're having conversations, they're having flashbacks that are disconnected and disjointed. And I'm like, well, now I have to watch the whole thing because I need to know what that has to do with that. And I kind of feel more like a detective too, because I'm seeing what the detective is seeing in his head, so to speak, connecting these people to his real life experience. And the editing is amazing.
It's brilliant. And at first, it is disconcerting and jarring at first, but then you kind of get into the rhythm of it, and you realize that in some scenes it's like historical for 100 years ago, but how that's impacting these people now, and then or it's this man thinking about his own childhood, and it's really good, surprisingly good. And then I started watching Shining Girls, which is on Apple Plus. Elizabeth Moss and Amy Brenneman play daughter and mother, respectively. And it's based on a 2013 book that I have recommended on the podcast called Shining Girls by Lauren Bukes. And the book at first was one of those that it was really dark, and I put it aside because I didn't want to. I was like, oh, I can't. This is too much.
I have to be in the frame of mind to read this. Yeah.
Or this was last year. But then pushed past it, and it is dark.
Yeah.
But I did see that Stephen King called it the black hole version of The Time Traveler's Wife. And that's very, very apropos. And And then, and the Time Traveler's Wife is getting a new series.
I saw that, and I actually liked
the book that was made into a movie which was good.
Exactly.
And then now it's going to be a series.
Yeah.
So, we'll see how that goes. We'll report back on that.
Yes.
But Shining Girls, it's sort of hard to describe it, but it's like a time traveling serial killer.
Wow.
And so this
you'd think someone would put a stop to that.
Well,
there are going to be agencies in the future regulating that kind of thing. I would think. I
read a book about that recently. But but Elizabeth Moss is going to be the one who's going to face off against this guy. What's going to happen?
Nice.
You can tell. Even if I hadn't read the book, you can tell.
They've set it up for you.
Yes. But it's like kind of similar to the other, the Under the Banner of Heaven, in that there is some disjointedness, and you have to work. You have to do the work to follow what's going along, because she, as an example, she's knocks on a door, her mother's apartment, and somebody else opens it. And earlier that day, that had been her mother's apartment, and so you don't know what's going on. Yeah. And then, of course, there's time travel, which is always tricky, but so far, I think they're doing an interesting job with it. And then I have had a weird coincidence, because I had been watching Russian Doll, and I think there's only 7 or 8 episodes, and I watched them all last week, and it was the second season of it. Have you watched any of those?
I haven't, but it is on my list of things to watch. Yeah,
it's another one you have to work, and it got a little silly in the second season, but it's another time travel type thing.
Oh wow!
And basically, in that story, Natasha Lyonne is the main character, and she dies, but then comes back to the same moment or the same day before she had died. And then this keeps happening, and she realizes that she can try to make things different and not die.
Okay.
And so
that is
it goes
not what I
there.
thought that was going to be about at all.
No.
That's amazing.
Yeah. And so it's, very trippy, mind-bending. And, but I'd noticed that there was a song in one of the episodes that I really like, that I never even paid any attention to it, but it was in a movie years ago that I loved called Bottle Rocket. And I just I saw that movie 50 times.
Oh, wow.
And so I knew the song very well. I can remember the part of the movie that it's in and all of that, but I'd never heard it anywhere else. And so I hear it in Russian Doll, and I thought made me think about it and look it up and find it on my Spotify. And it's called Alone Again, and it's by the band Love. And then in Shining Girls, that song comes on.
Oh, wow.
And I was just like,
what are the chances?
I know. I guess maybe it's the same music director or something.
I feel like there's some time travel incident happening, because someone's Crystal Googled that song. We're going to go put it in another show she's watching just to mess
until
with
she
her.
Doesn't say.
Yeah. I'd rather them do that than murder people with time travel. So, that's fine.
Yeah. I just was like, am I imagining that? It was very strange. So, yeah, but it's a good song.
Yeah.
Look it up. Let's see. So then, in a sort of related, I think I've mentioned this before, but I started watching a show that I don't know if how it's gonna go.
Oh, no.
But it did grip me at first. It's called Outer Range.
Oh.
It's on Amazon.
I did see that and thought about starting it, but then when I watched the trailer, it seemed supernatural, and I was like, I'm not in a place for that today, and just didn't start it, started something else, but yeah.
Well, when I hadn't seen a trailer, but I just saw the banner for it or whatever. And it looks like a Western.
Yeah,
and that's what I thought it was. To me, I was like, I don't want to watch a Western. And then I saw the trailer, and it looked like sci-fi, so I was like, okay, I'll watch that.
We go.
So we did the opposite of that. But Josh Brolin plays this rancher, and he finds something inexplicable in his
as ranchers do occasionally.
Sure.
Yeah.
A hole that is time.
Nice.
Basically, anyway, I won't
you
give anything
away.
You
keep messing with time in these books.
That's what I'm saying. I'm like, this is what's going on. I can't get out of it. But so basically, there is a line in like one of the earlier episodes Josh Brolin delivers that I was like, I just have to repeat that. He's like trying to be intimidating, and he's like yelling at this guy, and he's like, there are no Fritos in that hole, Carl. And I just stopped it, and I was like,
who is writing that?
Yes. Like, okay. So I don't know how this show's going to go.
It's going to be hard for me to take that show seriously because I'm going to be waiting for that line and disappointed when it doesn't come like anytime soon. Yeah.
No, you should watch it. I'm curious. I'm curious to know what anybody thinks about it because I kind of feel like I'm the only one that's watching it right now.
Absolutely.
Nobody else I know is. So. And it's weird. So that made me kind of think of other mind-bending movies. And so I made a list. So I'm curious if you've seen these or if you have others. Fight Club.
Yes.
Based on the novel.
And I'm actually following a book talker right now that is like going over books that, the world considers masculine and like retelling it in a different point of view kind of thing. Like, look, this is what happens in this book if you look at it this way. And actually, Fight Club was written by a queer man who was trying to show that men need to show their feelings more. You don't have to punch people in the face. You can actually discuss things and talk, and it's good.
I think that's somebody who just watched the trailer.
Oh, wow.
That thinks that thinks that's about men.
Exactly.
Or that it's masculine.
Exactly.
It's very much not.
Yeah, exactly.
It's that is toxic.
Yes.
To an extreme level.
Exactly.
And then Memento. Christopher Nolan's one of his first films.
I don't think so.
His first mainstream film. It's on your list. I promise you're going to want to watch that.
Okay.
Guy Pearce plays the main character, and he has no short-term memory.
Oh.
So every few minutes, he just resets. It's a brand new day, and he has to figure out ways to... He tattoos himself with important things so that he knows stuff. Yeah.
I think I've read the book, maybe. If there's a book because it sounds like a familiar thing.
Christopher Nolan, Jonathan Nolan, the brother, wrote it.
Okay.
And then they made the film out of it. There's also 12 Monkeys.
Yes, and there's also a TV series of 12 Monkeys.
Which I haven't watched. I watched one episode of it.
I watched like 2 seasons of it, and then the third season wasn't available just to binge watch yet, and I was like, I am going to come back to this the day it comes out, and then I've forgotten about it. And when you just said, I was like, I need to find that third season. This was years ago.
Yeah, we need to go back
really
and watch
good.
that.
I think it explains it more, like what is happening.
They had a lot more time.
Absolutely. I remember the movie obviously, but the TV series I've seen more recently, and I did like the TV series a lot.
Well, and there's a lot of references there because it's based on a short French film.
Oh, wow.
La Jetée by Chris Marker. And you should probably look at that sometime too.
Ooh.
And then there was I think I've talked about this before, but then there was a parody of that French film called La Poupée, which is like the doll. And so the character it's not, instead of it being a person, it's a stuffed animal. Anyway, but it all hinges on the final scene where everything is kind of revealed.
Yeah.
That's what comes from that short film. So
nice.
Also, the movie Seven.
Yes.
Got some. Why is this all Brad Pitt?
I was just going to say that's another.
I'm going to get out of the Brad Pitt section in a second.
I liked Seven because it was so suspenseful.
Yeah.
I remember it vividly. I'm not even sure how old I was when I saw it, but it's like I can remember parts of it so crisply today because I was into that movie. Like I'm watching every second of this.
Oh yeah, yeah. No, it's really well done. And Inception is another one.
Oh yes. And I got lost in Inception. I think I just hit it on a bad day where I couldn't keep up with it just because I was just like, I shouldn't have watched this today.
I watched it with other people who were commenting throughout it and, kind of like being like, what are they doing now?
Yeah.
Where are they going? And that, I had to watch it again after that.
I feel like I should give that movie another chance.
Yeah.
Definitely.
For sure.
Yeah.
Mulholland Drive, David Lynch obviously is always mind-bending.
Wonderful. Yeah.
Primer is a movie that came out late 90s, early 2000s, and it was like shot for $7,000 in Dallas. by, this guy's first film, and it's time travel. So we're back to that.
Yeah, it sounds familiar, but I can't pull it into my head.
It's worth watching. It doesn't come across, it doesn't look like a big Hollywood blockbuster, but it doesn't come across as made in the garage or whatever. And it kind of was.
Yeah.
And then there's Donnie Darko, one of my favorite movies.
Yes.
And then there were 2 films that came out that were competing against each other at the same time, The Prestige and The Illusionist. And they're both about illusionists, magicians, people.
Yes.
And there's
I didn't see either one of them.
The Prestige is better.
Okay.
But it has a twist. Big twist. Yeah.
Nice.
Identity, which is a movie with a whole bunch of characters. They all end up in this motel and somebody starts to kill them off and they have to figure out which one of them is doing it.
Are they outside of Las Vegas?
It's out in the desert somewhere.
Okay. Maybe I have seen that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's worth watching. Dark City is a futuristic sci-fi one, which at the time it had the shortest film rate, or the scenes, the individual scenes as it was cut together were the shortest in the history of film at that point.
So it's basically just blink, blink, blink,
yes.
blink, blink.
Yeah,
oh, wow.
It's kind of hard to watch, actually. But now I think we're probably more used to it. But 1999 or whenever it was crazy.
Golly.
Then there's Vanilla Sky, which is based on a Spanish film called Abre los Ojos, which is a better film than Vanilla Sky with Tom Cruise in it. But,
yeah. I remember Vanilla Sky's advertising, but I never saw it.
Yeah.
I don't go see Tom Cruise movies hardly ever.
No. I watched it because I'd seen the original.
Oh, yeah. That makes sense.
Watched the original one. And then Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless
Mind.
Oh, my
God. It's one of my top
Absolutely.
10 favorite movies
it's in
of
my
all
top
time.
10 for sure.
And it's so strange because Jim Carrey is not my favorite person, never was, but I could watch that movie. I have watched it probably 100 times, and we'll probably go home and watch it now just because we talked about it, because I
haven't watched it in a while, but
yeah, I can never get enough of that movie. It's so good.
Yeah,
it's so good.
Absolutely. And then just really quickly, The Fountain is another one. Very supernaturally mind-bending, trippy, I don't know all the words.
Nice.
But it's about, I don't want to say what it's about. Just watch it. It's hard to explain what it's about.
Yeah, exactly. Is it time travel? Okay.
Just you to watch it. And then Interstellar, which is, I didn't love it, but it's also falls in that category.
I liked it. Yeah. Well, I act like I watch movies and TV all the time, but I read more than I do anything. And now I've gotten lately that when I am watching TV, I want to watch reality television. So the only thing that I would even say anything about right now is that I watched Lizzo's Watch Out for the Big Girls.
I wondered about that.
Yeah, it's a dance competition to be on Lizzo's dance team, on stage.
I didn't know what that was even about.
It is wonderful. It gives me vibes of British TV shows where everyone is nice to each other.
Oh, that's
and if
what
you're
I
not
like.
nice to each other, it's very obvious. And I mean, they are so supportive of each other.
I'm all for that.
Yeah, Lizzo is so wonderful, and she's like a real person, and she's that wonderful in real life. Like I'm like, oh, we're fixing to see a side of Lizzo we didn't want to see, but I loved every second of it, and just really now I want to go to a Lizzo concert just so I can see those dancers. Like I was rooting for you the whole time, kind of craziness. So
I love
I loved
dance shows, so I'm gonna have to.
And they're amazing dancers. It's incredible, like the routines and the things they have to learn how to do. I'm just like, well, go girl, you do it. Get up there and do it. So.
Oh, good to know that. I didn't even. It was another one of those that it just kind of goes past. Like, oh, okay, what is that? You can't really tell.
It's happening. Yeah.
Okay, good deal. I'm excited about that now.
There we go.
And so then I have some things that just are kind of recommendations for things you should take a look at, check out.
Okay.
The first is an app called Lucid, and it basically is for visual learners. And so it actually takes a lot of articles and the main gist of a lot of books and a lot of things that are out there and turns it into this very engaging visual sort of show.
Oh, wow.
And I didn't know what to expect. But then I went and looked at it, and it's got, like, some very, like, the book Sapiens. And it kind of gives you this guide to this book so that, some of those things, like, especially...
It's not so dense.
Yes,
it's very dense.
That's the thing with nonfiction, is that sometimes I want to get what's your main point here.
Yeah.
I'm glad that you wrote 400 pages about how you got to that. I don't really need that part. Because, I'm not an expert in that field, and
Absolutely.
I don't need to know it. Yeah. But I want to know the new thing, And so, very good for that.
Cool.
And it seems like it's kind of new. And they add stuff to it all the time. So
I think it would be a great tool for people that don't normally read nonfiction or heavy books like that, and is trying, like, the first 40 pages of a nonfiction book is my hardest part, because I'm trying to get into the book and I can't just get in it. So if I could not get into it, go to Lucid, watch something about it, I'd be like, ooh, now I definitely want to read more. So that sounds great.
Yeah, and I haven't spent a lot of time with it, but the stuff that I've looked at has been impressive. And so it kind of focuses on psychology, philosophy, history, science, technology, business, just kind of a wide range of things. And so,
Cool.
Yeah, it's I'm checking things out. Like, and then I've also, and I don't know where I'm coming up with these. I don't remember. I just write everything down, and then I just assume that I came across it somewhere. Who knows? But there's also a website called Which Book.
Oh.
And so, people are always, like, that why we're talking on this podcast, people are always trying to find, like, Book Talk.
Yes.
Ways to get good recommendations.
Yes.
And that is one of the most challenging and most rewarding things for a librarian.
Oh, yeah.
Is if we find, like, somebody asks for something and we find the right thing. Doesn't always happen. And that
y'all
ruins
do
the
it
day.
to yourselves with the encounter boxes. You include the option of having a librarian pick a book for you, and every time I do it, I'm like, they'll never top this book. And then the next month, I'm like, what? This is so good. Y'all always impress.
No,
always
not
impress.
always. But thank you. Not always. They just don't remember the ones that.
Oh, there we go.
But and some people. I have a friend, Jim, who has been. Every time he gets to come in, or every time I see him, tell me what to read. Give me something to read. He has never liked anything that I've.
Oh no!
And he wanted to branch out into fiction because he only ever read nonfiction, and so he just didn't know, like, what am I going to like in terms of fiction. Well, we haven't found it yet, so still working on that one. But on this website, it's a unique take on it, because there's lots of things like that will give you, like, if you read this, you'd like this.
It's one of my favorite book talk videos is when they do that, where they're like, oh, if you liked this, or even this TV show, you should read this book. I love those recommendations.
Yeah, usually they're pretty good. But in this one, it actually takes, like, different categories, like mood and emotion. A world map, so you can, like, find if you want to read about some place. And then character and plot. And it has these little sliders. So it's, like, conventional or unusual. Nice. And then you, like, move the slider closer or further away from something. Or, like, optimistic or bleak, And
so
you can just
they're
kind of
just
put the mood.
Recommending the book that closest matches these things that you choose.
These categories.
That's amazing.
And
it's almost like a book written to your specifications.
Yeah.
That's awesome. What's the name of the site again?
Which Book?
Which Book? Okay,
yeah.
Nice.
Not like which, as in with W-I-T-C.
Yes, yeah. Like, which book will I read next?
Right.
There we go.
And so I'm going to give it a shot. I don't know.
I will too.
It's very, because I looked at it and played around with it, but I didn't go seriously try to find something. So, yeah, report back. Let me know.
I will.
I'll do the same. Because I definitely do think about that. And we both actually talked about that today, where, like, I'm not in the mood for this.
Exactly.
Whereas, 2 weeks from now, I'll watch every single thing, or I'll read it in one sitting. But you just got to be in the right mood. So maybe they'll be able to tell you.
Exactly.
Then, again, I don't know where I came across this, but I found it so mind-boggling, and I don't even know why I find it mind-boggling, so maybe you can help explain this. There is a mathematical rule called Capricar's constant, And I'm not anything near even like a mathematician. It's like the opposite of what I am.
Yeah.
But I'd never heard of that, and I don't come across things like that very often. That just like never even heard it uttered. And so basically, it's a rule. It was this an Indian mathematician in the 40s who came up with it. And so you basically take any 4-digit number, and as long as it's not all the same number, like 111, it has to have at least 2, but any 4-digit number otherwise, and then you take the number in ascending order and descending order and subtract one from the other.
Yeah.
And then you do that with the next resulting 4-digit number, take the ascending and descending and subtract it. Eventually, within 7 tries, you will always get the number 6174.
Well, I don't believe you. I'll have to do it myself.
Do it. I have it written down.
No,
see,
I can't. My brain and math don't go together, but this is
Maybe
something
that's
I
why.
would feel compelled to do just to prove them wrong. And then it would
find one?
Yeah, it would be
And
like,
then your
yeah,
brain melts.
exactly.
That's kind of how I felt. I was just like,
I think
but
that's
why?
amazing. I think that's
weird.
amazing. Like, that does make me think that there's codes and numbers that we don't understand now.
Right?
Here I go. Here I go
no.
down the rabbit hole. Thanks, Crystal.
We know what kind of books you're going to be reading for the next few weeks. But and then, as I'm thinking about it, I'm like, most of math is mystical to me.
That's
so
true.
why did this really capture my imagination and make me think, why is that's so weird?
Yeah.
I don't know.
Well, it is weird.
Yeah.
And it's compelling because now I want to know more about it too. And
Yeah.
I can't wait to start jotting down numbers to test it with.
Right. Anyway, so we'll end on that note.
Absolutely.
And if somebody else can figure out why that's significant or not, or we're just idiots
we'll
because
just
we just
turn
don't
it over to
understand
people
it enough.
smarter than ourselves.
I
There
love
we
to
go.
do that every
Yeah.
day. Just somebody explain this to me, please, because it's weird.
Awesome.
All right. Well, thank you so much
No,
for coming
thank
to do
you.
this.
Thank you so much for inviting me. It was wonderful as always. I feel like we're just having a great conversation about books we've read. It doesn't seem
That's why
like
I love
anything
doing
else.
this.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I don't know who's out there besides you.
There
and a couple other people listening.
You have your
but
fan base. You definitely have it. The Bodice Rippers proved that.
That was your fan base, I'm afraid. But we'll just have to use some term like that in the title of everything.
Yes.
Maybe that's what it was.
Exactly.
No.
Maybe.
No. They're going to tune in to find out your recommendations this week.
Well, I hope so because I did enjoy a lot of those books. Yes.
Well, we're going to sign off.
All right. Thank you so much.
Bye.
Bye.